So the House of Representatives on Thursday rejected a bill seeking the creation of a 6-year single term for the president and state governors. On the same day, pro-Biafran agitator Simon Ekpa was arrested alongside 4 other persons over alleged incitement of violence and terrorism financing. This is Standpoint. I am Precious Amayu. Now let's begin with developments from Finland, where Finnish authorities, especially the Finnish Central Criminal Police, confirmed on his website that 5 men were arrested following a request by the National Bureau of Investigation. The police also mentioned that Mr. Ekpa used social media platforms to spread separatist propaganda, incite violence, and encourage illegal actions which had caused significant disruptions in the southeast of Nigeria. Finnish investigators had also linked him to incidents of violence in Nigeria, which were believed to have been fueled by his online activities. Following this development, Nigeria's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has confirmed the arrest. The acting spokesperson of the ministry, Kimebi Ebienfa, in his statements explained that the arrest of Mr. Ekpa follows sustained diplomatic pressure by the Nigerian government to Finland to take action against the activities which were linked to violence and instability in the southeast of Nigeria. And let's tell you that this is not the first time he will be arrested. In February 2023, Finnish authorities arrested Mr. Ekpa shortly after he threatened to disrupt Nigeria's 2023 general elections. Now, report has it that he was arrested for collecting money for alleged terrorist activities. The pro-Biafra agitator was later released shortly after being questioned by Finnish authorities. So there is mixed reaction to this particular development, but let's get to the very specifics of it. Joining me to discuss this is National Defense and Military Strategist Bishop Johnson and the Executive Director of Rule of Law and Accountability Advocacy Center, Oke Uwangume. They both join me via Zoom. Good to have you both.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
So let me start with you, Bishop Johnson. People have, there's just a mixed reaction to it from across the country. Some people are celebrating this. Some people don't think that it is any significant development, but the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has called it a significant development. I just want to get your reaction to this particular arrest.
Yes, it can be a significant development depending on what follows after this arrest. Like you rightly pointed out, this will not be the first time that this particular individual has been arrested on similar allegations. But we are hoping that this should be the last time that he ought to be arrested for the same allegations. My group had personally written to the Finnish embassy. I don't know why it took them this long to bring this guy to order. Because, as democracies, no democracy should be a sanctuary for anybody to sit in that democracy and create unnecessary upheaval for another democracy. So my take is that, look, for this to be a significant development, there has to be some serious steps that need to be taken. And one of those steps is that, one, if Mr. Ekpa cannot be extradited to Nigeria, which for me, I think is very unlikely that he will be extradited, considering the fact that there is no extradition treaty between Nigeria and Finland, and also considering the abysmal human rights records of Nigeria. I don't think it would be appropriate to bring him back to Nigeria.
But Mr. Bishop Johnson, I will get to all of that, in just a moment. But I want to stay on a statement you made. You talked about you're hoping that this is the last time. What are you hoping for?
Well, we are hoping that he is at least he is held accountable for all the wanton destruction of lives and property that we have experienced in the Southeast. Look, what has happened in the Southeast since this social media propaganda, Southeast has never seen anything like that since the end of the Civil War. The entire life of the people had been completely wiped off. All the wealth that we had accumulated since the end of the Civil War had been destroyed. Lives, lost needlessly. I don't believe that you want to spike your face by cutting off your nose. Any form of agitation, and I don't have any issue with agitation for self-determination. It's the people's right, okay? And we support people's right anywhere. But I don't believe that agitation should take that dramatic turn in such a way that the people that you claim to be fighting for and defending are dying. They are needlessly dying. I don't believe that is a good way of anybody to carry out agitation. And when you take it in the context of the fact that even Mazen Nnamdi Kanu himself had repeatedly, in several of his court appearances, denounced all this needless violence. He has also done that through his special counsel, Dr. Aloy Ejimako, and through their spokesperson, Ekpa Powerful, that they do not support any kind of violence as a means of this agitation. And they had asked that those responsible for those violence to please stop. And this young man continued either because of the commercial benefit that he derives from it, because this whole thing became a commercial enterprise in the Southeast where these people are making a hell of money, are making a hell of fortune out of the misfortunes of innocent people of the Southeast. So we want this guy to be held accountable at the minimum. All
right. So, Mr. B. Johnson, there is just a lot to unpack from the statement you have made, and I will come back to you in just a moment, to take them one after the other. But let me get Mr. Wanguma's reaction as well to the arrest of Simon Ekpa by Finnish authorities.
Well, the activities of Simon Ekpa in the Southeast, operating from Finland, have been of major concern within the Southeast and across the country, including, of course, within security circles. And particularly his incendiary rhetoric, inciting violence, attacks on civilians and security personnel and infrastructure, and using violence to enforce it at home in the Southeast. His activities have no doubt led to escalating violence and exacerbating insecurity in the Southeast. The whole escalation has been basically, around the activities of Ekpa and the group associated with him in the Southeast, which is different from the mainstream IPOB. Note, like my colleague said, that IPOB has repeatedly disowned Simon Ekpa and his group and condemned his tactics and his activities. And of course, as you know, Simon Ekpa has himself often taken responsibility for many acts of violence in the Southeast, leading to many people in the Southeast expressing frustration, about his activities, and the security, particularly the military, have repeatedly called on Finland and, in fact, the European Union to rein in Simon Ekpa, without any action. His arrest, therefore, comes to many with delight and expectations that he and others associated with him will be brought to account in accordance with the law. We don't want a situation where he's arrested like it happened before and he's let go. However, Simon Ekpa, whether it is Simon Ekpa or IPOB, or even before all this, MASOP, all these represent mere symptoms of the real challenge, the problems that are driving insecurity in the Southeast. Unless we address irresponsible political leadership in the Southeast that have left the gap that these separatist groups have emerged to fill, the federal government's failure also to address the age-long grievances over marginalization, political exclusion that these groups have continued to complain and agitate about. The federal government's single narrative and resort to military action alone, in order to address insecurity, violent repression, instead of dialogue, constructive engagement with community leaders and youth groups to address these grievances. Unless this is done, we are likely going to even have more of Simon Ekpa. Even if Simon Ekpa is sent to prison today, his members are still all over the place in the Southeast. So I think we should go beyond, looking at these individuals. They constitute a lot of, menace. I agree, but I think that the root cause of the drivers of insecurity.
Mr. Wanguma, if I may quickly comment, I want to speak to you on what Bishop Johnson raised earlier, which is the issue of the idea that IPOB and Nnamdi Kanu himself has continued to dissociate themselves from the activities going on now in the Southeast, the sit at home and the killings. But can IPOB exonerate themselves from, or itself from Simon Ekpa? Because we saw that statement immediately by Emma Powerful saying, Simon Ekpa is not a member of IPOB.
Well, I do know that on a number of occasions, IPOB have consistently dissociated themselves and actually condemned the activities. And like I said before, his tactics, his activities, even with the news of his arrest, they have also come up to praise the arrest and called for action. So I do not think, but of course, I mean, Simon Ekpa was a member of IPOB, but I think that the mainstream IPOB seem to have disagreed with his own style of going about the agitation for whatever they're asking for. So I think that it is easy to separate them because they have openly dissociated themselves from him and condemned whatever he's been doing.
So, Bishop Johnson, I'm coming back to you. I also wanted to take that up with you. If IPOB can in any way dissociate itself or exonerate itself from the activities of Simon Ekpa, saying that, well, he was a member of the group before, as it seems, maybe they have fallen out.
Well, he was a member of the group when Mazen Nnamdi Kanu was not in incarceration, okay, and he was following orders and the lead of Mazen Nnamdi Kanu. But when Mazen Nnamdi Kanu was arrested and incarcerated, he quickly, took over a portion of IPOB, not all of IPOB. There's a radical element in IPOB that decided to follow him. They believe that violence, against their own people was a way for them to actually actualize their objective. Like my co-panelist said, the mainstream IPOB is not in support of this violent approach to this agitation. Yes, they want agitation. Yes, they have the right to agitate for self-determination. And like my co-panelist also said, some of all these things we are seeing, and I completely agree with him on everything that he has said. Some of the things that you are seeing are just symptoms of very serious problem in the Southeast that had existed in this country, particularly since the end of the Civil War, and which the federal government of Nigeria seemed to have, blindsided itself from, without taking some serious measures to be able to close the gap. You see, if the gap didn't exist, there wouldn't have been MASAP, there wouldn't have been IPOB, and you wouldn't have Simon Ekpa. Now, I am of the view that the arrest of Simon Ekpa is good and should be significant based on the steps that will be taken by the federal government of Nigeria and the Finnish authority. However, I don't know whether his arrest will also bring peace to the Southeast if Mazen Nnamdi Kanu still remains incarcerated. Okay, because every reason they had given, because you need to understand that some of these organizations, and I've been studying terrorist organizations, I'm not saying that IPOB is a terrorist organization, but someone seems to have been, using that methodology.
Mr. Bishop Johnson, I just want to confirm that you're still there. It looks like you're having a network challenge. All right, let me bring in Mr. Wanguma back into the conversation. All right, let me bring in Mr. Wanguma back into the conversation. Before that network challenge with Mr. Bishop Johnson, he was talking about the release of Nnamdi Kanu, as the only some sort of recipe required for peace in the Southeast. But you were talking earlier about the fact that Simon Ekpa also has his own supporters. And so whether he's arrested or not, he has supporters. We've seen groups where you take out the head, somebody else springs up. Is that, does his arrest contribute, even the release of Nnamdi Kanu, how well will that contribute to peace in the Southeast?
Well, first of all, I think it is important for us to note that there has been, a transition, in the way these different groups have operated. Before now we had MASOP, which then was preaching peaceful approach. They were completely peaceful in their approach, in their agitation for the restoration of, the separate state of Biafra. And government's response to MASOP was repression, to use violence, to use military violence to suppress their agitation, rather than engage with them to understand their grievances and find a way to address those grievances. Now, failure to address those grievances and the use of violence as the only means to respond to these agitations has led to incremental radicalization. And of course, that IPOP, was a splinter from MASOP. They felt that the MASOP strategies were too peaceful. So we had an IPOP that became more militant. And so, yet, we thought that government would have learned a lesson, that if you keep using force as the only answer to agitations, that what you will achieve is radicalization and increase in violence, and in fact, a cycle of violence. That is why the more you kill them, the more they resort to violence. And so the arrest of Simon Ekpa is a good step, but like he said, before now, there have been calls for the release of Nnamdi Kanu. I know how many state governors and political leaders in the Southeast that have appealed for the release of Nnamdi Kanu as a way to begin to restore peace and normalcy in the Southeast. But the government continues to hold him. So releasing Nnamdi Kanu is crucial, but addressing the root cause of these agitations, the socioeconomic and political factors driving these grievances, marginalization, and then poor leadership in the Southeast, corruption. I think that all these we need to address.
But Mr. Wanguma, I thought these issues were already being addressed. We've seen the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, Benjamin Kalu, at the forefront of some sort of conference and collaboration and conversation, especially in the Southeast. Isn't that working?
How many of the community leaders and youth groups are they engaging with? Conferences with who? See, the thing is that government needs to be strategic and sincere in their approach. We need to identify the leaders of the groups involved in these agitations, invite them to the table and not to organize conferences which I do not know who. Government needs to be sincerity and good strategy in, reaching out, constructively engaging and dialoguing with the authentic leaders. And they need to involve the governors of the Southeast and the political leaders in this negotiation, so that you bring the right people to the table, not to organize conferences with people that have no influence in dealing with these problems.
All right, let me just confirm that we have Beach Johnson back in the conversation.
Yes, I am back.
All right, so you were speaking earlier to whether IPOP can exonerate themselves, but I just wanted to add this question to him because I'd asked it to Mr. Wanguma as well. If the arrest of Simon Ekpa and the release of Nnamdi Kanu is any solution to the situation in the Southeast, it was even while Nnamdi Kanu was in prison that we saw this happening, Simon Ekpa taking over. What are the chances that if Simon Ekpa is, for example, if he's tried and sentenced, for example, that another leader would not also arise?
You see, that is the point that I was trying to allude to earlier before the disruption in the network. You see, look, all these organizations have gone beyond one individual. There are several other power centers within these organizations that are doing their own thing however they want it. Now, this is not to diminish the fact that if Ekpa is incarcerated, if he's tried and held accountable for the violence that he has incited in the Southeast, that he will not have an impact. There are those who listen to him and seeing that he is now behind bars, those people will have to think twice. And one of the things that the reason why the issue of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu keep coming up is because of his incarceration, his absence, that led to the emergence of Simon Ekpa, who was more militant than Kanu himself. Kanu had a more measured approach in dealing with this agitation. So when he was no longer on the scene, then, power aborts vacuum. Simon Ekpa rose up and filled that vacuum, unfortunately, in a way that had been very consequential to the region in which that he said he was fighting for. Now, arresting him is one step. Releasing Mazi Nnamdi Kanu is also another step towards achieving that main objective, which is restoration of law and order and the peace and security and prosperity in the Southeast. You have to do all of these things combined. And like my co-panelists have said, all of these things we are seeing are symptoms of a much bigger problem in the Southeast, which he had alluded to, the issue of marginalization, the issue of socio-economic exclusion. And I was saying that since the end of the Civil War, all of the promises, we ended the Civil War on the note that there is no victor and no vanquish. And there was supposed to be some kind of reparations, to bring back the Southeast into the main stream of Nigeria. And none of that has happened so far. And that is why you continue to see these agitations. Whether Simon Ekpa is taken out or Nnamdi Kanu is taken out, this agitation is not going to stop. None of these two men that you see were around during the Civil War. I wasn't even around during the Civil War. But here we are today talking about Biafra. So it means that if these serious steps are not taken by the federal government to address some of these concerns that are leading to this agitation, you're going to continue to have this agitation 10, 20, 30 years from now. So we must address the root causes of the agitation, even as we treat the symptoms of the problem. And that is where the federal government must play a very bigger role. You mentioned something about conferences. These are not matters of conferences that are holding in Omahia or in Oka or Enugu. You need to get down to the grassroots and identify all these people. And the people who are doing this agitation are not even in the media. We have to identify all these people and bring them to the table and find out what is it that can be done for these agitations to stop. What does the government need to do to ameliorate or remedy those concerns that are leading to this agitation, which are also leading to this crisis and insecurity that you are seeing. So those are the steps that need to be taken.
Mr. B. Johnson, because of time, I'm trying to manage. I have just a few minutes, but I'm trying to manage the time to just get in some questions. And I'm staying with you.
Okay.
Because many have said perhaps if Simon, before now, that perhaps Simon Ekpa is arrested, if he's prosecuted, it could become some sort of, if not judicial pronouncement, maybe a political solution for Nnamdi Kanu to be released. Do you see a glimmer of hope for him now that Simon Ekpa has been arrested?
Well, I would hope so. I have been one of those who have been at the forefront of this Mazi Nnamdi Kanu matter. And I had spoken out in several occasions on your network and several other networks that the solution, the judicial process in Mazi Nnamdi Kanu's matter has reached its maximum limit. It cannot proceed anymore judicially. The solution to his problem is one of political. The problem in itself is a political problem. And so, therefore, it needs a political solution. That is the position that most people and I had agreed on, that we need to bring in political solution to addressing what is a political problem. And this thing is not only unique to Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. There were these instances of Sunday Igboho in the Southwest. There had also been agitations in several other places in Nigeria in which they had applied political solutions to address those problems. I don't see the reason why that of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu should be an exceptional case. I think there has to be some kind of political pathway to ending this matter involving Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. And the Mazi Nnamdi Kanu's release is a step in addressing some of these problems, because we want to deny the people who are using the excuse of his incarceration to foment insecurity of behavior in the Southeast. Once Mazi Nnamdi Kanu is released, we would have denied those people that excuse that they use to commit the atrocities that they are committing in the Southeast. Any other person after Mazi Nnamdi Kanu is released who continues to perpetuate violence in the Southeast is a criminal and should be treated like criminals are treated.
All right, so let me come to you, Mr. Wanguma. What do you also make of this? Because Mr. Bish Johnson was speaking to it earlier, the issue of the extradition, whether that was going to be possible. Simon Ekpa is a Finnish citizen. He's a politician there in the ruling party. He has rights there as well as a citizen. He has also talked about the fact that Nigeria doesn't have an extradition treaty with Finland. How do you see this playing out? Because the Nigerian government seems to be a bit optimistic that he will be extradited.
Well, I mean, the point has been made clearly that there is no treaty between Nigeria and Finland. And so that may pose a challenge to extradition. But I do not think that it's completely ruled out. There could be other diplomatic approaches. If the Nigerian government engages seriously with the Finnish government and perhaps because as a matter of fact, the crime committed by Simon Ekpa is actually a crime under international law. So there are many ways that there are many diplomatic ways that Nigerian government can explore with the Finnish government to get him repatriated to Nigeria. But even if it's not, I mean, like I said, the offenses involved here are international crime, and so he could also be tried under other international, criminal courts, and so on and so forth. But I mean, like I said earlier, the focus should not be. We should not just end up with the arrest of even if he's arrested and prosecuted. And that will not really end the insecurity in the Southeast. Like we said, the release of Nnamdi Kanu is key. But because, as a matter of fact, a lot of other, splinter groups with purely criminal intentions have emerged because government, rather than try to understand the grievances that are leading to these things, is resorting to violence, and people are responding by, also resorting to arms. So I think the government, this is an opportunity for government to review its approach, engage in sincere dialogue, and identify the leaders of these groups, bring them to the table and find a way to resolve this. That is the only way to ultimately deal with it, but also address the leadership vacuum in the Southeast. There is no responsible political leadership in the Southeast unless all these are addressed. We will keep running around the corner,
Precious, let me add to this too as well.
So, Beach Johnson, I want you to, of course, you react to his views and then also to this, because this is the view coming from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs through his spokesperson. Like I said earlier, they have described the arrest as a significant development, but they say that it is not just a significant development, but a significant development in addressing the activities of IPOB and neutralizing the influence of transnational actors and their impact, in quotes, on our national security. I wanted to also speak to that as well, in terms of their view.
Well, see, the Nigerian state had been a part and parcel of the problem that you have in the Southeast. Their actions and inactions had contributed to where we are right now. Like, as I was saying, I don't think that the focus should be on extradition of Simon Ekpa. I wouldn't want Simon Ekpa extradited to Nigeria to come and face the same conditions that Nnamdi Kanu is currently facing in Nigeria, where when court gives order, the government of Nigeria will vehemently refuse to obey the order of the court. That will be another rallying point for those his supporters who are still on ground here in Nigeria. I think that the best thing that ought to be done is for Simon Ekpa to be prosecuted in Finland, because this is an international crime. So he can either be prosecuted in Finland or he can be prosecuted here in Nigeria. I would prefer a situation where he is held accountable by being prosecuted in Finland and his issues addressed in Finland, unless the Finnish government can extract some serious conditions from the Nigerian government that their abysmal record on human rights violations will not apply to the case of this Simon Ekpa. Because if that is not done and he is extradited to Nigeria and he comes back and he's held in the DSS dungeon, like Nnamdi Kanu is held, his incarceration will become another rallying point for his followers in the Southeast, and you will continue to see this cycle of violence in the Southeast. So the focus shouldn't be on extradition. The focus should be let him be held accountable wherever he is, and not be brought back to the Southeast where you're going to have two Igbo sons both of them incarcerated on the same issues without the government of Nigeria listening to what the people are saying.
All right, we'll see how it plays out. So many dimensions to this. We'll continue to get updates and report it. Thank you so much for your time. To both of you, National Defense and Military Strategist, Bish Johnson, and then the Executive Director, Rule of Law and Accountability Advocacy Center, Okay Umaguma. Thank you both, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
All right, that was just one development. We'll be back with another story.